Have you ever been in a relationship that seemed perfect at first, but then, out of nowhere, it just started to fall apart? No cheating, no big betrayal, but still, something just didn't feel right. It was like being slowly suffocated, and you couldn't even explain why. What if the problem wasn't you? What if you were simply with the wrong type of person, the kind that doesn't break you with one big blow, but drains your spirit a little more every day? Tonight, I want to introduce you to one of the darkest minds in philosophy, Arthur Schopenhauer, a man who looked at love not through rose-colored glasses, but through the cold, bitter lens of reality. Now you might be thinking, why should I care what some old German philosopher thought about love? Simple, because unlike others, Schopenhauer didn't try to sugarcoat anything. His words weren't pretty, but sometimes the truth isn't. He believed there are certain kinds of women who could destroy a man, not with a knife, but with patterns, with energy, with manipulation so quiet, it feels like it's your own fault. This video is not about blaming anyone. It's about awareness. And trust me, these 5 types, you've either seen them, dated them, or maybe even been one of them. So if you've ever felt like a relationship made you smaller instead of stronger, if you've been burning instead of growing, this video is for you. Let's begin. Some women aren't looking for love. They're looking for a transaction. To them, relationships aren't built on emotion. They're built on economics. They know exactly what kind of car you should drive, what kind of watch should be on your wrist, where you should take them to dinner, and how quickly they'll walk away if one day you lose it all. Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "Wealth is like seawater. The more we drink, the thirstier we become." And when someone builds their entire sense of value on money, they lose the ability to see people for who they really are, because love, to them, is just another investment. A materialistic woman might look polished, elegant, powerful. She knows how to turn heads in a room. She speaks with ambition. She might even seem independent. But slowly, you start to feel like your presence in the relationship has to be paid for. Every gesture, measured. Every moment, judged. And every gift you give is never quite enough. Your dinners aren't fancy enough. Your trips aren't exclusive enough. Your wallet isn't keeping up, not with reality, but with the fantasy she thinks she deserves. And here's the real danger. If the day ever comes when you can't keep up, when life hits you with a setback, and you need support instead of performance, she disappears. That smile, that warmth, that "I'll always be here" feeling, gone in seconds. Schopenhauer believed a foundation built on wealth is the most fragile of all, because money can buy comfort, but never loyalty. It can impress, but never connect. You deserve a partner who sees you beyond your income, who stays when things are hard, who doesn't measure your value in brands or bank balances. Real love doesn't ask you to compete with someone else's lifestyle. It asks you to show up as you are. And the one who truly values you will never make you feel like your worth depends on your wallet. Have you ever been in a relationship that felt like a constant roller coaster? One day everything is fine, and the next, you're in a full-blown argument over nothing. No betrayal, no real reason, just chaos. At first, you make excuses. She probably had a rough day. Maybe she's stressed. It'll pass. But it doesn't. Instead, it becomes a pattern. Calm, tension, explosion, tears, makeup, and then right back to the beginning. Schopenhauer didn't call this love. He called it addiction to chaos. Some people don't enter relationships to love. They enter them to feel alive. And for them, peace feels boring. Stability feels empty. They need drama to feel like something's happening. A woman like this doesn't know how to exist in silence. She'll start a fight, not because she's angry, but because quiet feels threatening. She uses conflict as a way to stay in control. And every time you think you've finally calmed the storm, she's already preparing the next one. The worst part, you might mistake it for passion. You think, wow, she feels so deeply. That must mean she loves me. But real love is quiet. Real love doesn't hurt you on repeat and call it connection. Schopenhauer once said, "Some people only feel alive when they're burning inside." And, sadly, they set others on fire just to keep that feeling going. So you need to ask yourself, am I in love with her? Or am I just used to the chaos? Does she care about my peace? Or does she only feel satisfied when I'm falling apart? If your relationship drains you more than it builds you, maybe it's not love. Maybe it's just emotional war, disguised as passion. Sometimes, a person can play the victim so well. You don't even notice how you became the one to blame. You say something simple, respectful, honest, and suddenly, the silence gets heavy. She looks away, eyes full of tears. Then it comes. Fine, you're right. I guess I'm always the problem. And now, somehow, you're the one apologizing. Not because you did something wrong, but because you dare to express how you feel. Schopenhauer knew this type all too well. He believed that some people use weakness as a form of control. By constantly positioning themselves as the victim, they make sure that your voice doesn't matter anymore. Even the softest truth feels like an attack. You think you're being kind. You call it compassion. You think you're being a good man. But what's really happening is that you're disappearing. Little by little, silently. She becomes the center of everything. Her feelings, her needs, her comfort. And you learn to tiptoe, to keep the peace, to keep her from breaking down. Schopenhauer believed this kind of dynamic is a silent form of dominance. Not with shouting, but with guilt. You start holding your tongue, not because it's right, but because you're afraid of how she'll react. And that's where it gets dangerous. When your emotions don't have room to breathe. When you're always the one backing down. That's not love. That's not connection. That's slow erosion. A partner who always plays the victim might actually be the one taking your strength. Because as long as you're busy protecting her feelings, you're forgetting your own. Look at yourself, honestly. How many times have you silenced your truth just to avoid her tears? How often have you swallowed your voice to protect a relationship that only hears hers? Maybe it's time to ask the real question, not to her, but to yourself. Do you still have a voice in this relationship? Or are you just calling your silence love? Some wounds are invisible, not because they're small, but because they're buried deep. So deep, they follow a person into every relationship. And anyone who gets close ends up carrying that pain too. Schopenhauer once said, when a relationship is built on unresolved pain, one person stops being a partner and becomes a therapist. A woman with unresolved anger toward her father might not say much at first. She may casually mention he was absent, strict, or not speak of him at all. But the wound still speaks, in the way she struggles to trust, in how she tries to stay in control, in the moment she puts you down just to feel safe. At first, you want to help. You think, she's been through a lot. I'll be the one who's different. I'll prove that not all men are the same. But slowly, you realize you're playing a role in a story that didn't start with you. You're constantly being compared to someone you've never even met. And every tiny mistake, every delay, every joke, every distracted moment becomes evidence in her mind that you're just like the rest. You're either defending yourself or slowly becoming someone who never feels good enough. Schopenhauer believed that people who haven't faced their pain often end up passing it on, not out of cruelty, but because pain becomes their language, their way of connecting. But here's the truth. You're not here to replace her father. You're not here to carry guilt that doesn't belong to you. You are a human being with your own emotions, your own boundaries, and your right to be heard. Any relationship where you constantly have to prove you're not like him isn't a relationship. It's a trial, and you're always the defendant. If you find yourself explaining, apologizing, trying to undo damage you didn't cause, maybe it's time to step back, because some wounds need to heal before love can grow, not inside it. If they don't, you may end up bleeding from a cut that was never yours. Some relationships begin like a dream. There's chemistry, excitement, late-night conversations filled with fire. Everything feels alive, like you're finally with someone who's different. But slowly, things begin to shift. You start to feel like you're not really in the relationship. You're just orbiting around it. Arthur Schopenhauer viewed narcissistic women not just as emotionally difficult, but as quietly destructive. He didn't believe they were looking for love. They were looking for worship, not a partner. A mirror. At first, she seems confident, charming, fearless. She speaks like someone who owns the room. You think, wow, she really knows her worth. But over time, something inside you starts to dim. Not because she's loud, but because there's no space for you. Everything is great, as long as she's being praised, as long as you admire her. as long as you play your role. But the moment you speak a truth she doesn't like, the warmth disappears. Now she's distant, cold, passive-aggressive. Suddenly, you're the problem. You begin to question yourself. You apologize, even when you haven't done anything wrong, just to keep the peace. But that peace, it's not real. Women like this have learned to use affection like currency. They'll give you love, as long as it feeds their ego. But the moment you need to be seen, they go blind. Your thoughts only matter if they involve her. Your feelings only valid if they support her. And without realizing it, you're no longer in a relationship. You're in a performance. You are the audience, clapping for someone who never claps back. Schopenhauer once wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone." But when you're with a narcissist, even solitude can feel less lonely, because being with someone who doesn't truly see you feels like screaming into a mirror. You deserve more, not just someone to admire, but someone who admires you, not just someone to listen to, but someone who hears you. If the relationship feels like a stage where only one person gets the spotlight, maybe it's time to ask yourself, was this really love? Or was I just a background character in someone else's show? No, not all women are like this. And no, not every relationship is a trap. But when you hear 5 different men describing the same kind of emotional wounds, you can't just blame bad luck. Schopenhauer didn't think women were evil, but he did believe that certain patterns, if left unchecked, can slowly destroy a man from the inside out, even without any malicious intent. Some women aren't looking for love. They're looking for something they can't give themselves. Validation, control, peace, revenge. And a man who doesn't understand what he's walking into might willingly hand over his life to something that looks like love, but isn't. At first, everything feels intense. She seems wounded, vulnerable, or maybe she's fiery and passionate, or soft and broken, or wildly unique, like no one you've ever met. You think you can help her heal, that you'll be different, that your love will be enough. But slowly, you start losing yourself, your confidence, your clarity, your inner voice. Not because she's a villain, but because she's carrying pain that's never been healed, and she's making you carry it for her. Schopenhauer once wrote, "Compassion with the undeserving is cruelty to yourself." Sometimes, kindness becomes a form of self-betrayal, because you're so busy saving someone else, you don't notice you're drowning. Love should never ask you to disappear. It shouldn't demand that you shrink, just to make someone else feel safe. If the relationship makes you question your worth, if it feels like you're fighting a battle that doesn't belong to you, maybe it's time to pause. Sometimes, protecting your heart means walking away from something that only pretends to be love. That's not weakness. That's awareness. If this message resonated with you, make sure to subscribe. There's more truth coming your way.